Welcome to everybody to this 30-minute presentation titled Stress Beyond Belief. 3 ways to help your employees now. We are delighted to present this information to you, which we hope will be supportive on multiple levels. Today, we will really be discussing both the magnitude of the stress, burnout, and mental health crisis that is facing both employers and employees, as well as a tactical, practical, 3-pronged framework that you can use to tackle this crisis. We have found that having a framework makes seemingly overwhelming tasks much less stressful. On a micro level, this is true for your employees, and on a macro level, this will be true for your organization. I'd love to share just this quick quote by James Clear, who is a thought leader in the space of healthy habits and wrote a best-selling book titled Atomic Habits. And James says, "Working on a problem reduces the fear of it. It's hard to fear a problem when you're making progress on it, even if progress is imperfect and slow. Action relieves anxiety." So my goal for you is to walk away from this talk with an empowered sense of a framework to use in your own organization and a little less anxiety about the problem itself because you're actually taking action. So what makes me so qualified to have this conversation with you? I am the founder and chief wellness officer at Namaste Wellness, where we have been supporting incredible organizations for almost 20 years with comprehensive mental wellness programming. I'm a clinical social worker, I'm an executive coach, a yoga and a meditation teacher. And just this past March, in the midst of the unfolding of the pandemic, I released a book titled Inner Wealth: How Wellness Heals, Nurtures, and Optimizes Ultra-Successful People. I was super excited when this became an Amazon bestseller because, quite frankly, it gave me the opportunity to share the learnings that I have had for so many years in being really in the heart of this work with so many other people. Last, Namaste has been creating these comprehensive mental wellness programs for almost 20 years. We were born out of the 9/11 crisis, so this is not our first rodeo. And I think you will really benefit from learning from what we learned from our mistakes, our failures, as well as our successes, so that you can hit it out of the park on day one. And I just want to note that we've worked with a wide range of organizations, so the suggestions that I'm going to give you today are really applicable across the board, from financial institutions to healthcare companies to startups and technology. We have worked with almost every type of organization, both big and small. So I really hope that what we give to you today is applicable to your organization, as we've seen it be so powerful for so many others. So let's dive into the main issue here. Here is the deal. Employers and employees have a mental health crisis on our hands, in addition to the other crises that we are dealing with at this time in our country and in our world. 9 months ago, just about 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 employees reported struggles with mental health. Today, more than half are stressed, anxious, depressed, or even worse. And to make matters even more challenging, these numbers are likely very low because 50% of employees don't even like to report on these issues to their employer or to their colleagues. Discussing mental health issues at work can be really, really hard. People are scared about being penalized already. People are concerned about job security. So this just creates a very shaky foundation and ground. So whatever your COVID-related employee mental health, whatever you think your COVID-related employee mental health challenges are, they are likely much, much larger, and unfortunately, much, much larger. So, that coupled with the fact that most people believe that this situation is only getting worse. Over 80% of parents are concerned with their children's mental well-being. They're concerned with their development, their schooling, and issues of isolation. And I'm actually one of those parents, as I have 3 kids myself, and I'm juggling work and family. I also hear this concern from almost every friend, every colleague, and all of the employees that we work with here at Namaste. So the struggle is real. As we move from fall to winter and the weather gets worse, we can assume that this problem is also going to get worse. So this is a growing crisis. It's important that we get a handle on it and create a plan now. Something you might want to ask yourself or marinate on is, how do these big industry-wide figures compare to what you are actually seeing and feeling in your organization in terms of stress, burnout, and mental health? And, one thing to note and to remember is that it's probably worse than we think it is. So I speak with a lot of HR directors really on a daily basis. And oftentimes it's the leaders and the HR directors who are dealing with a multi-level stressful situation. They themselves may or likely are juggling quite a bit. They are looking out for their teams and their employees and all of their direct reports, which can also feel like a lot on their plate. And they also have the organization's best interest at hand. Most businesses are working really hard to survive and thrive through this crisis. So all in all, between the personal challenges, the challenges of supporting the mental health of the team, as well as looking out for the organizational best interest, can feel like an overwhelming task. So really, what is the cost of this problem, this huge stress, burnout, mental health problem on your organization? From a lost productivity standpoint alone, studies show that 90% of employees are losing about 1 hour a day. I think that's actually very generous. And even if your mental health issues and stress and burnout issues at your specific organization are not as large as the numbers in these more national statistics show, it's still a pretty big and expensive problem. In addition, when all of these long-term acute mental health challenges, which by the way, are not what the human body and mind were built for. We're actually built to respond to short-term acute challenges. We do that really well. And long-term acute stress is toxic and dangerous. And as a result, this will increase healthcare costs by 200 to 300% in future years, because people develop all different kinds of chronic issues as a result of this stress and burnout, from chronic pain to back pain to more severe mental illness to all different kinds of inflammatory diseases. So again, the problem is real and it is expensive. So let's talk a little about, that's really focusing on some of the numbers and the impact of what's happening on your organization from a financial perspective as a result of this crisis. But I think it's also really, really important to look at some of the cultural manifestations of this issue. And, one thing that stands out, really loudly to me is this idea of worsening customer interactions. So very recently, a couple weeks ago, I had an experience with a company that I'm sure most of you are customers of or, know very, very well. Basically, I called this company to troubleshoot an issue with their customer service. And I'm actually a very nice person to get on the other end of a customer service call. I'm talking to this woman, and in the background, I hear her baby and her toddler. And I, in a friendly way, say to her, "Oh, it sounds like you have your hands full." Well, lo and behold, right when I said that, this poor woman burst into tears and really just started kind of unraveling on the phone with me. So I found myself really supporting the customer service support. I spent a few minutes kind of talking her down and calming her down and letting her off the hook with some of my issues. And I don't think this is what the company had in mind in terms of their customer support, that I, as a customer, was calling to support their support person. So The bottom line is that productivity, culture, and interactions like these are a problem. And we don't know what we don't know in terms of what's going on with our work from home employees, how they're doing. Substance abuse is on the rise. There are many, many concerns that just may not be on our radar until they reach a tipping point that is actually damaging to our organization, our brand, etc. One very brilliant man and world-renowned business leader who I worked very closely with in a coaching capacity a few years back shared with me once that morale is always worse than we think it is, which is kind of an idea that has been haunting me since that conversation. So where do we begin? How do we approach this? As I mentioned, when we have a framework or a plan, it makes challenges exponentially less overwhelming. And as I mentioned as well, taking action in and of itself relieves anxiety on both the part of the organization as well as the employees. So here is our three-pronged framework for success that will also work for you. As you see, we have education as the foundation. Next comes the practice of evidence-based healthy routines to support mental health. And on top of that really comes that nuanced support and connection that people need, because there's a wide range of challenges that employees are facing, whether they're living alone and isolated in an urban apartment, whether they're juggling, homeschooling, children, work, etc., whether they're concerned about aging parents or stressed about at-risk teens. These are really tricky times for everybody, but everybody's challenges are unique to their situation. So let's talk about this framework. What do we mean by education? Well, we need to educate employees both about the problem as well as the potential solutions to the problem, meaning employees need to know that if they're experiencing mental health challenges, that they're not alone, that this is a major problem nationally and globally, and that there is no shame in it. After all, as we know, these are really, really challenging times. And when we can normalize that for employees, that in and of itself makes a huge difference. It's really just about calling out that elephant in the room. A second reason why education is so vital and important is that it creates a platform and a vocabulary for leaders and HR managers to really start a dialogue and a conversation about these issues. It's bringing them out onto the table for everybody to understand and explore. Education also really, really can empower people and just break down a lot of the barriers that people are facing around this conversation. Employees need to know exactly what will help them immediately. So, years of therapy and other types of really wonderful interventions are very, very helpful in our lives. However, right now, people are needing quick solutions, things that they know will immediately impact their ability to function and their overall mental health and well-being. So sharing research-driven factual information with your really smart employees about things like the fact that 30 to 40 minutes of cardiovascular activity has been proven by research to have a dramatic impact on low-level depression and anxiety, and in fact has the same impact as, in some cases, Prozac or Zoloft, depending on the magnitude of the disease. Now, this is nothing against medication, which I think is incredibly important and useful. However, everybody knows, for example, that education is good for them, but if they really understood the impact that exercise rather has on their mental health, it could, for some people, be really, really motivating. In terms of other ways to provide education, collecting articles. There's so much out there right now. So collecting articles you find in the news about how people can support themselves, about research, about educating people about the problem, that is huge. And sharing this information with people on an internal communication system, whether it's an intranet or a platform like Slack, this is very, very, very useful because, again, it just starts to open up the doors of that conversation in a really consistent way. I know a lot of organizations that we work with will have, for example, a Slack channel just dedicated to this information, which they really ask employees to check in with frequently. So that, along with webinars and master classes, this is something that our organization does a lot of, but these are wonderful ways to begin to create this educational foundation. Another thing that we've done quite a bit of that's been successful is creating smaller group conversations where employees can share notes and educate each other. For example, if there's a group of employees that are dealing with young children at home and need tips around managing screen time, or employees are dealing with feeling isolated and wanting to connect, grouping them together with a facilitator to share those experiences and compare notes can be a really organic, natural way to provide education by employees helping each other, as well as create a sense of support and community, which is so powerful. At Namaste, we call these small group salons, which kind of makes them feel very appealing and attractive to employees, and very, very supportive. And lastly, distributing just simple tips on things like the impact of food on our mood, or how sleep can impact our mental health. These little reminders can actually make a really meaningful difference in people's lives, because what we've found and what research has proven is that small shifts in behavior, for example, just getting a good night's sleep, can make a huge impact and have a giant ripple effect on people's productivity and overall health and well-being. So that's the first sort of layer of the framework, is education. The second layer of the framework is really about practice. It's about the actual healthy routines that can make a big, big difference. And before we dive into this, I just thought it would be fun if we just took a moment to practice ourselves, because I'm sure we're all dealing with a lot on our plate. And what that looks like today is, together, just taking 2 really deep breaths. So together, we're going to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Once again, a deep breath in and a deep breath out. So I actually feel better just from taking those 2 deep breaths, which I think is a really kind of beautiful example on how something really, really small can make a really, really big difference. So when it comes to practice, that's really the idea, is how do we give employees tactical, practical tools that they can utilize that will dramatically impact their overall functioning, their clarity, their creativity, and their ability to have what we call a window of tolerance for stress, when they feel like they're actually able to cope with stress. First and foremost, flexible schedules. Giving your employees flexible schedules because they're juggling a lot, and letting them know that part of the reason for these flexible schedules is for them to make time for self-care. You are telling them that you think self-care and practicing healthy routines is important, squeezing it in wherever they are able. At Namaste, we provide live experiences, 15 to 30 minute sort of together action experiences, which include meditation, fitness, yoga, which also are really well received and create a community feeling around practicing healthy behavior. Also giving employees access to a range of resources. There are some really wonderful apps out there that people can access to support practical behavior around meditation, fitness, etc. However, one thing I just want to put on your radar, because we've been working a lot within this ecosystem of mental wellness tools, is that sometimes if people are really struggling with mental health and wellness issues, A simple technological solution might not do the trick because it can leave people feeling sometimes further isolated. And if you're really struggling and, needing support, logging on to an app for meditation may not even feel available to you and might actually make you feel a little bit more lonely. However, all that said, it's the ecosystem that's so important. As we say at Namaste, there are power in options. So giving your employees lots of options, because we recognize that their needs are nuanced, their schedules are nuanced, and that different things are going to be right for different people at different times. Lastly, kind of the cherry on top is this concept of one-on-one support. So as I mentioned at the beginning, leaders in your organization, HR managers need to create a platform and a vocabulary to connect with their teams, to ask people how they're doing, to empower managers to check in with their direct reports to make sure that they feel supported from the inside out, that as an organization, we are making sure that everybody feels like their voice needs and wants to be heard. I highly recommend, whenever available, having individual conversations, really making time to check in with people, given the changing landscape in our world, is just hugely powerful. And in and of itself, again, creates an environment of support, which makes people feel better. That said, leaders and HR managers are not always going to be equipped with the types of stressors and issues that employees are facing in terms of how to best support them. So, looking to your EAPs, which can be really useful, but sometimes in what we're finding in this current climate is that the EAP approach to support is not always applicable to this need for kind of immediate solutions for people, in which case we find that more of a coaching approach can be really powerful because it gives people very actionable ways to support themselves. We want to create an environment of self-help, and that's what coaches are really trained to do. So thinking about that one-on-one support and what the specific needs of your organization are and your employees, and how those resources are going to meet those needs specifically. So in other words, just kind of throwing an EAP at your employees is not necessarily going to solve the problem at hand. Lastly, another simple thing is, in terms of this one-on-one support, is, really in these small group meetings that may happen in your company, something as simple as making space at the beginning of a meeting to sort of check in on how people are doing. I think about with my kids when they were little, we used to say, roses and thorns. What was the best thing that happened and the hardest thing that you're dealing with? Well, sometimes even creating a version of this that feels appropriate and safe for your small team to say, how are you doing? What's one thing that's going well and one thing that you're struggling with? And as managers, modeling that behavior by actually sharing how you're doing. Again, these are interesting times in terms of boundaries and mental health issues. And I encourage you to explore those boundaries a little bit, because sometimes, perhaps crossing over a boundary in terms of what you share may have historically been inappropriate, but in today's climate may actually be vital and hugely important to your organization. So the bottom line is that you need an ecosystem to empower and enable your employees to support themselves no matter where they are landing on the spectrum of their needs, issues, availability. And ultimately, creating this ecosystem is going to impact the bottom line of your organization, because your employees are going to think better, work better, feel better. So, a couple quick tips to make sure that these things happen and that there is a really good net to make sure nobody falls through the cracks, which is important when it comes to mental health. So creating multiple touch points, as I mentioned, is key. Another reason is because people learn differently. Whether you are an auditory learner, a kinesthetic learner, a visual learner, whether you like master classes or to read articles or to do things on experiential level, human beings are very different in the way they take in information and support. So making sure that you have a landscape of different kinds of mediums is really, really vital. Also, whatever it is that you're doing, the communication should come from the top. Great programs always really start at the top in terms of that internal ambassador that's going to encourage people to utilize the resources available to them. Another thing that's been really amazing is when clients of ours hold these types of events, hold supportive events for mental health and wellness on company time, meaning at a time when a meeting is already scheduled or a town hall. This makes employees feel less stretched and less tugged in a million directions. And as an organization, really enables you to really put your money where your mouth is in terms of wanting to support people and taking up this valuable time in doing that. So lastly, just to mention, ongoing communication is key, meaning that someone might be okay last week, but not okay this week. And so making sure that there are touch points each and every week is huge. And that creates a landscape, again, where you're creating a really beautiful safety net so that people are not falling through the cracks. When we get off this call, we are going to send you a beautiful package of tips to get you started. These mental wellness tips can be delivered weekly to your employees' inboxes. They can find their way to an intranet or a Slack channel, whatever you use. But this is a bundle that is intended to just help you launch your internal conversation and education around mental health and wellness. These tips are based on Namaste's 4 pillars, which are movement, stillness, connection, and nourishment. And I think they provide an amazing foundation for your employees in order to kind of grab the low-hanging fruit in terms of the ways that they can help themselves and get that process started.
I'm so delighted to share any and all information that I have learned and discuss the possibility of Namaste as a resource for your organization in supporting employee mental health and well-being. So please reach out to me. My email is julie@namasteny.com. My phone number is 917-821-6882. I look forward to supporting your organization and your employees in any way that makes sense for you.